everybody. My name is Larry Hafer, Director of Sales with Agoro Carbon Alliance. I live in the big metropolis of Firth, Nebraska, southeast of Lincoln here just a little bit. So pleasure to visit with you today about the carbon markets. Please feel free to ask questions. We can really handle this fairly informal. We travel quite a bit around the country, speaking to groups and visiting with producers, both farmers and ranchers, based on our program. And one thing that's really pretty evident, we were in Alabama last week. Those folks asked the same questions that folks in Nebraska asked, that folks in Texas asked, or if you're in the Pacific Northwest. So a lot of buzz around the carbon markets, a lot of things that are out there. We're not going to really do much of a commercial today. We're just going to walk through some of the basics and try to answer your questions, if that's all right. So if you look at what is soil carbon, how does it get in there? You know, soil organic matter contains about 58% carbon. So when you look at that, carbon feeds soil microbes, improves nutrient cycling. So in the things that you do every day, you're sequestering carbon. There's some different things that you can do to sequester more carbon, obviously, and other things in terms of what we call practices that we'll talk about a little bit. But the cycle and how it gets in the soil from the atmosphere is really something that you guys do with your growing plants, whether it's in your pasture land or in the row crop sector, is something that we look at in terms of storing additional soil organic carbon, so that we have an opportunity to market it as a carbon credit. So carbon farming and soil health really are kind of one and the same. They work hand in hand. So if you look at, it provides multiple benefits. So what's the opportunity? Why are we doing this? Well, the global farm decarbonization opportunity that there's, it's like a 1 gigaton, which is a tremendous amount of carbon that's there. So when folks look at, hey, how do we offset emissions, greenhouse gases, and look at the opportunity there, they're finally looking to agriculture for that huge opportunity to make that happen and give agricultural people an opportunity to realize revenue from it. Carbon farming practices, there's no doubt that they drive profitability. They increase both productivity and profitability, yields, and the longer you stay with it, the more benefit that you see and from the program. And so there's mutual benefits from increasing soil health and then storing extra carbon as an additional revenue source. There's different, obviously, generations of carbon credits, and we're just starting to get into that again in the United States and looking at different opportunities that are out there. So through regenerative farming, we can also secure long-term revenues. So I think one of the misconceptions out there is that improving soil health or increasing your soil organic carbon or creating a carbon credit is a short-term thing, and it's not. It takes a long time to do it, and it takes a dedicated effort and an opportunity to work together with your operation so that not only is it verifiable, but it's also of higher value. So there's a lot of paid for practices out there that we can talk about. There's different opportunities for income on your farm. They may not result in a verified high value credit that can be marketed. So that's some of the confusion. Now, as your operation looks at this market and these opportunities, something else that you can benefit from is taking part in different segments of that industry. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. So what types of carbon markets are there? And I know if you listen to the news at all, there's the international EU compliance markets, which are really regulated. It's more in the European side of the world. The domestic compliance offset markets, there's some states that have been mandating in Canada, California, Oregon, and Washington, which those three probably don't surprise anyone from the mandating standpoint. But where our program functions today is in the voluntary market, which really offers a lot of flexibility and gives the producers some autonomy in what they want to do every day. But the most really reason behind it is a lot of them, there's marketing and social responsibility, ethics, reputation, and then a lot of people look at their supply chain risk. Some of these different companies in terms of the food industry that they're looking at, how do we offset, how do we work with agriculture to benefit from that standpoint. So this is something that I always found super interesting. So how many of you remember acid rain? I remember when I was a kid, they scared me to death that the whole world was coming to an end. I mean, I lived it. I didn't sleep at night. I was like, wow, this is really serious stuff. It's just crazy. And everyone kind of joked about it. I grew up in agriculture communities, didn't think much of it. But if you look at what President Reagan started and what George W. Bush finished was some of the regulation around from these coal plants. And if you look at the slide on this one here versus this one in that time period, so we actually could make huge change, and we could change the outcome of what was happening. And so I use this as an example of this is really what we're talking about doing with the carbon markets today and soil health and regenerative ag. So I just usually borrow people's presentations from my team, so everyone uses different companies, but there's all kinds of companies that are looking for carbon offsets. These are just a few examples. But if you look at these basic five or six companies, the carbon reduction goals of those five equal more than 25% of the global supply that's available in terms of carbon credits today. So think about that just a little bit. Then on the other side of it, 6% of the emissions of all the Fortune 500 companies already exceeds the global supply that we have. So what's interesting about where we're at today in this process is the demand for these credits, and especially on the agricultural side, far outweigh the supply. What does that usually mean? It means there should be an income opportunity, right? If corn supply is not great and prices, it's the same thought process. So we get so many questions, is this real? Is this really something that's going to happen? And there's so many companies that have made pledges and mandates that, hey, we have to be carbon neutral by 2035 or 2040 or 20 whenever, that they are going to continue to be on the hunt to have that opportunity to see those and have them come to fruition. So why would anybody buy a voluntary carbon credit? It's not based on necessarily a true index. It's not traded on the Chicago Board of Trade. It's not, and the government doesn't control it or do anything like that today. But it's not just for anyone. Buyers have specific reasons that they need them. There's people in the supply chain that look at it. There's oil and gas companies. There's airlines that are looking to offset their emissions. That's really how this has all started. There's a lot of non-ag voluntary buyers that want to buy credits from agriculture, which people view that in a number of different ways, but it's really positive that you can benefit from things that you do on your farm that improve your operation, your soil health, and your longevity of your land, and also gain revenue from it. So if you think about it that way. Ag supply chains and buyers, there's also that they need and they want to buy, that they have a need and they have to offset these emissions. And so it's an opportunity to look at it from that standpoint. So how do we work with and connect all these dots and work through this? So there's a couple of things that are key. So buyers want credits to be permanent, and they want them to be additional. So permanency and additionality are terms you'll hear quite a bit, and they're a little bit confusing. Permanency is that long term. So, for instance, they don't want you to change your go to a very intensive rotational grazing program in your ranching operation, and then next year change it and not do it anymore. They're looking for that long-term permanent, the buyers are, in long-term permanent. Also, they want it to be additional or new. So if you've been in intensive rotational grazing for years, then you have to find a new way or more productive ways to do it, different ways to prove additionality. If you've been doing certain tillage practices or using cover crops, you need to look at additional opportunities and different practices to add on to that so that the credit or the carbon opportunity is something that a buyer wants to look at. Carbon credits are tracked in public marketplace and registries, so when we work with individuals, they have your specific fields or specific areas will be tagged with basically a number that marks that this is where this carbon came from. And so I think that's a unique, interesting, so there's some traceability to it so that those folks can understand where those, where their credits come from. Quality credits require buyers and sellers to work together. So what's really interesting is I'm the director of sales. We don't sell anything. I'm actually the director of buying because we actually buy the credits from you guys. You guys are actually selling. Wouldn't that be nice to be in agriculture and pull up on your driveway and actually sell a guy something instead of buying it all the time? It's an interesting concept, isn't it? It's something we're not quite used to. We don't really, that's why we step back and go, okay, wait a second, are you know, is this real or what are we doing here? And I find that we get a lot of questions about that. Credits that fall short of buyer standards have trouble being sold. So if they don't meet the permanency or additionality and they can't be verified by third party, and we utilize third party verification on credits so that we're not the ones verifying, so that it adds credibility and it adds value to what you're doing. So I think that's something that's really interesting to understand too, is that credits, if they don't meet the standards, don't meet the requirements, can't be verified, are probably of less value. Doesn't mean they're of no value, but we try to focus on the highest value, because if you're going to spend the time and the effort, then you should get the most value for your credit. And I think that what we've seen in the market as it's continued to evolve is companies will want mixtures of all kinds of credits. They may want a group of really high quality credits. They may want them from a ranching operation in a specific area. They may want credits from a row crop operation. And as you look through as we move forward in this and looking at, you know, the different animal production systems and that maybe be able to generate credits as well, it's a really interesting dynamic that's out there. So here's how this kind of works. So we'd be considered, Agoro would be considered a project developer. I call us like a facilitator. So our teams work with growers to develop the science, methodology, do the soil sampling, provide the guidance and the agronomy expertise, or provide the range and pasture, the rangeland tracking and verification for those operations, so that we partner with you. So then growers are contracted. So one of the things that we could spend all day talking about is, so if you're involved in one of these programs, you would sign a contractual agreement, okay? There's many different kinds out there. Those that's what ties you to us to then also start down the path of generating these credits and making them work for you. So once you're contracted, and then we're a little bit unique. We focus on range the range and pasture segment, and row crops and cereal crops. So no offense to anyone else that's out there, there's a lot of focus on the row crop piece, and it's important to us as well. The challenge with row crops today is how many of you have been no-tilling? Okay. Using cover crops? Okay. Have you studied carbon programs and realized that they're going to tell you they don't want you because you're actually took a leadership role and decided to be progressive on your operation? So don't shoot the messenger here. We get all that. Okay? We're trying to change that and look at, we call someone like himself or you guys that, or anybody raise their hand that's done this, we term you legacy growers, people that have been doing these practices. And we're looking at opportunities to enhance that and have you be able to be part of those programs and look at different opportunities. But in the scheme of the real world, we've found a really interesting niche in the range and pasture piece. And not to take anything away from row crop farming or anything, but historically, the rancher doesn't get much mailbox money. Usually it's just bills, right? When you open the door. So our programs that have the opportunity to fund some funding up front, provide some income to make changes on some of these ranching opportunities has been really unique for us. We still are very focused on the row crop sector, but we continue to look at alternatives for people that have been doing these practices to make it happen for you. So there's that. So then you get to soil carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas avoidance. So then, once all that's done, then we work with third-party carbon auditors and verifiers. So we work with Vera, there's Gold Standard, there's all kinds of these verification companies that are out there. We have found that, in our opinion, just our opinion, that Vera has been really flexible. They've been willing to learn more about agriculture and understand that what they think maybe they need to do and versus what's practical and real world application. So that's been really a good partnership for us to work with them. So then the third party carbon audit we verify, and we do that by soil sampling is how we're doing it today. We soil sample year 1 to get our baseline. We come in at year 5 and take another sample, and then they'll sample again at year 10, okay? So our contract is 10 years. So we have an initial sample, we have a look in at 5, and a look in at 10. So if there's an increase in soil carbon from year 1 to 5, you get paid. If there's an increase from 5 to 10, you get paid, okay? So there's an opportunity through this from revenue stream, and we can, if you've got questions about that or whatever, we can visit about what that looks like, but that's kind of how the function of it works. So then the registry issues the credits, and project developer works with people to purchase that want to purchase the credits and bring companies and organizations together. So as this whole dynamic evolves, there's opportunity for, we also just, all we can do today is say, hey, this is what our baseline for a carbon credit, what the dollar value is. If we get down the road 5 years and it's 5 times that amount, then we share in that value with you, okay? We don't, it's not our goal to keep all that. We feel that as much dollars that can get back to the farmer and the rancher, that's what we have to do, because that's what's important, because that's who's making the changes and making the opportunities to happen for these carbon companies. So when you look at, what's interesting is they're like, well, people look at different things. Dell will be the first to tell you, if you improve the soil, you improve a lot of things. And if we improve the soil, we'll improve the carbon, we'll store more carbon, and you'll get an opportunity to market that, okay? So Obviously you cover the soil, protects from water and wind. Less tillage and soil disturbance is one of the, is how some of the practice that we focus on. Plant diversity is something that in the range and pasture side we look at. We also look at that in cover cropping. Having continual live plants out there in your operation adds carbon. And one of the things that's so important in this whole cycle is to integrate livestock. And I think that's something that's really important as we look at, how to make the most benefit from what you're doing and to build more resiliency on your farm and ranch. So this is kind of an interesting picture. We obviously all know that better soil has better water holding capacity and all that. I like to show this picture though on how, I'm gonna try this. So these are 2 fields in Brookings, South Dakota after 80 hundredths of rain. The one on the left is obviously someone that's been paying attention to soil health and regenerative ag and trying to store more carbon. The one on the right is losing most of it on that same day. So it's an interesting process that we look at there. I'm not a scientist, right, Tim? You know that. All I really want to show you here is what's interesting. So look how much organic matter's in your fence rows. So that's what we're trying to do with some of this and you get it. You increase soil organic carbon, 2.5 times. You can get a ton of carbon per year. And what we're looking at is trying to measure metric tons of carbon. And so it's an interesting process to watch through how some of these practice changes can make that happen. So if you look at the practices and some of the benefits, so obviously we don't say get rid of nitrogen. There's opportunities to reduce nitrogen use, fertilization, different methods. That's one practice benefit. There's opportunities that may lead to decreasing other nutrients in that. You get more timely operations in the spring. We were just on a farm in Minnesota last week where they'd had a bunch of rain last spring, couldn't get in the field. And the fields that he'd been testing cover crops on, he was able to get in those fields much sooner. And it was really interesting to watch these growers experience some of these things. Yields become more stable and have less seasonal variation, less risk in the system for loud changes and crop insurance programs. And obviously, if you're more consistent, you do that. And I think above all, profitability is increased. And it's not necessarily about gross, it's about what money did you make and doing these opportunities. Just a couple points I wanted to make with this slide. So the soil health 9-state economic soil study, if you look at net income increased 85% on corn farmers and 88% for soybean producers that adopted soil health management systems, and which is very significant. And net farm increased by $52 an acre on corn and 45 bucks an acre on soybeans. So there is some real value in that, and that's not even bringing in the carbon payments or the opportunity into that. All right, so in our program, some programs are different. Our program, your obviously farm has to be located in the United States, and you have to be able to implement or use the practices that do make those opportunities right there. Leased or rented acres can be enrolled, but you need to understand the risk. So something that, in row crop, most leases are year to year, aren't they? And so that's an opportunity. You have to have a pretty good relationship with your landlord. In the ranching community, we haven't had a whole lot of pushback on our 10-year contract because land doesn't change hands very much in that piece of the puzzle. So there's our contracts can be transferable and go on to someone else. So I think that's something that you just need to understand the risk. We look at enrolling 500 acres is what we look at. There's obviously some opportunity to look at that as you do that. The farm has to have been in crop production or some kind of production for at least 5 years. And the farmer that has not already implemented practices in the program, we reward for new practice and management over current management on terms of practices. So if you sign a contract, we work with what we call our grower success team that comes in and works with people side by side, because 10 years is a long commitment. And but we feel it's really important in terms of how we work towards getting that high quality credit. So here's kind of how you look at this. So farmer signs up with us to get one-on-one support, creating a carbon cropping plan. Incentives. So with us, we have a couple different kinds of contracts. One has upfront payments, and one has payments at year 5 and 10. And it really depends on your operation on how you pick and choose that. I can't really say without sitting down with you what makes sense for your operation. It depends on if you need it, if you need cash flow to implement some of these practices, buy some of the equipment, do some of those opportunities. So there's that piece of it. And then the verification that I talked about, independent, auditors verify the data. So we collect, there's certain data points that we have to collect to verify these credits. Now, if I'm assuming a lot of you are used to precision farming and all the data you collect, ours is way simpler than that, okay? There is a look back period that we look at. What have you been doing? And then what are we going to do as we move forward? So our team works with you, and we have to collect that information on an annual basis. It gets pretty easy once your baseline is set and do that. We do not share your data with anyone. That's not the point of why we're doing this. We need the data to verify what you're doing so you can get the most value out of your carbon. So, and then as we look and we sell carbon credits on the global market, why the farmer continues or the rancher continues to generate carbon every year and receive annual payments. So in some of our practices, there'll be some upfront money, and then you'll get monies years 2 through 4, up to 5, based on practices, and we can sure can visit about that. And that's how a lot of programs are set up, obviously. But it gives you an opportunity to kind of kickstart your journey with the practice changes, and then gives you the opportunity to build carbon for some significant payments in year 5 and year 10. So here's some of the practices that we work with. So nitrogen management, low-till or low or no-till, and then cover crops is really on the row crop side. In the pasture side, we look at adding additional species of grass. That is not something that we dictate. That is something that's based on your area and something that we work with a number of different individuals that can provide feedback and help in that realm for looking at that. We look at optimizing grazing situations, intensive grazing, rotational grazing. It can be a number of different opportunities. It can be something pretty basic to something really intense. It just depends on what kind of plan you want to put together for that. Then also, integrating animals and looking at different fertilizer. It's really not spelled out that well up here, but we look at fertilization. Doesn't have to be synthetic. So those are our 3 practices on rangeland: fertilization, biodiversity, or adding a different species of grass, and then the rotational grazing piece. So. All right, I'm sure no one has any questions about this super straightforward carbon journey that we're on, right? Any questions? So today, just to give you an example, so we pay, let's say if you're a rancher and you fertilized and added species. So we pay $15 an acre for that, okay, one time. And you can do it multiple times, but within the contract you only have to do that one time, okay? And then when your carbon, if you choose the option where you get paid up front, your carbon dollars at year 5 or $18 a ton, okay? And in year 10, they're 20. That's your base, okay? So we could run some scenarios for you on exactly your county and how you look at that. We use Comet Planner and Comet Farm, which is a USDA program that has all the counties and has the evaluation of carbon sequestration based on practices, okay? And so, I mean, you can, Dale, I don't know if you have any specific examples you remember in your head on what the dollars per acre would be. That's fine.
So on 500 acres, how many credits? How many do I own?
You own all, I mean, honestly, we own them together from a marketing standpoint. I think as we move down the road, I know that we have customers that want to keep some of their credits. They may let us market some. They may want to market some of their own as well. But you have to have all the infrastructure to do that. You have to have the buyer relationships and all those things to make that piece of that happen. But from that standpoint.
So what is the price?
Today the average is probably 5 or 6. If you're just going to go on the open market, but there's credits selling for 40. There's credits selling for 7 or 8. I mean, it's kind of all over the board. But that's where the opportunity is in this verification piece and having the ability to prove that the practices were done on those opportunities.
500 acres, how many credits are there? Who's dictating the volume of credits?
You are by the practices you choose.
So what's the maximum amount of credits that I can get on 500 acres?
The maximum number you can produce. Sorry, I'm not helping you here, but there's no limit.
So if you sequester 24 ton an acre, you're paid accordingly.
Yeah.
So it's all paid on the increase. So we do initial sampling, and I'm not trying to steal.
No, it's fine.
One crazy school of thought is that if you're doing the right thing already, you won't sequester more carbon. Where actually what I've got seen, I've been in every state on this, on the soil health side, is the better your soil is, the more of a sponge it makes to sequester more. So this is off the record, but we had a little patch on our farm that last year an unbiased group did it, and we sequestered 24 ton an acre. All right, now is that typical? No. But whatever you do to keep increasing those practices on your land, and that's where like my team comes in, Larry's group, we're right there with you. Because we want your soil to be really good for 2 reasons. We want you to make a whole crap load of money on the farm side, but we want you to capitalize and make as much as you can on the carbon side. So it's a win-win both ways, but there's no top-end potential, and in fact, I want everybody to swing for the fences on this.
And that's where, in your case, sorry, I understand your question. With having no limit or no top to it, you can really sequester a lot of tons and make a lot of revenue on a small acreage, if it's 500 acres, because you may have the opportunity to do so. Go ahead. we have so many to sell, so currently what we do is we put together what we call projects. So there'll be so many acres within these projects with producers, and we'll do many of those that will have so many credits tied to them, and gives the opportunity to do that and market it. I think what's unique as this evolves, what we're excited about is we're going to get to pick and choose who we market your credits to. And it might be other agricultural type individuals. It could be companies that have the same philosophies we do and our customers do. And I think that's something, as this thing grows and expands, that's really interesting. We had an opportunity to host some folks that are looking at some credit opportunities last week. Very little agricultural background, obviously. That's the world we live in, right? If you look at, we're trying to do two different sides of this whole thing. What was so encouraging through that last week was we took them to some farms. They understand the passion behind what some of these folks like yourselves are doing every day, and they're excited to be part of it and to bring dollars into agriculture, which I think is something that, from a revenue standpoint, is something that is super important in this. Some of these, I think you'd be surprised. I've never had anyone not somewhat shocked on what the payments are. I'm not trying to overpromise or anything, but these dollars can be legacy changing for your operation. And if you have the mindset that, hey, we want to, this may be something that helps keep it for generations and keep it moving forward. And what's so unique is we're going to continue to have new practices and new opportunities and new things that can qualify, and you can just keep stacking them on top of each other. So, John, in your case, that's what's interesting is, well, crap, I'm out today. But what if there's 3 other things that I can do coming up? I bet you're going to probably latch onto them and do them. You might be thinking about doing them already. So the thing that I just explain to folks is keep an open mind, do your research and ask questions. We really enjoy educating folks and just talking through it. There's a lot of carbon choices out there. We understand that. But sit down with somebody, have somebody walk you through it. It's so important to do it on your own operation. We can talk about what ifs and this and that, and whether we're talking about, Lancaster County, or we're going to go out in western Nebraska or somewhere else, there's different opportunities and there's different ways to look at it. So that's all we ask is, if we can help you in that educational piece, I think that's an important part, because there's a lot of different stories out there that's going around. Let's just talk about what it really is and what the opportunity is and see if it fits for you. So, go ahead.
What's the downside of this? You get a baseline, you get 20 years. Is there a downside of this? What if your carbon sequestration, what if your organic matter drops?
So, that's a great question. So in our prepay model, so in that case, in year 5, if you didn't sequester anything and you said, man, this really isn't for me, I want to get out of this, then there's some of that prepayment we have to talk about how we get that back. If you're committed to staying in the program, let's face it, folks, agriculture's kind of ruthless, right? You could have a drought, you could experience something, that just, kicks it down the road just a little bit. If you don't sequester in year 5, we just keep going and work through. Yep. If you stay in the program, you don't have to pay anything, because we're just going to take it on throughout the entire contract and work as hard as we can to sequester carbon in that next period.
What about year 10?
That's a great question. I think it's 4th and 25, and it didn't work. We only really require any payback in that first 5. Really what we're doing with those payments is kind of like no interest financing those for you. We do some incentives over time that some of those aren't paid, or don't have to be paid back, but it's us funding them instead of you, which I think is okay. I think that in this environment today, we all like a little 0% interest kind of assistance. So, go ahead.
Does Agoro maintain a buffer pool of credits for those kinds of situations?
Great question. So, all carbon programs are required to do a 20% buffer. So those credits are banked. They're never used. They're never sold, and that's not unique to us. That's everyone. So what that does is it's kind of a little bit like what you're asking. So let's say that by chance Nebraska is super dry. That's happened, right? And we didn't sequester a lot of carbon, and you're in this big pool project of ours. So there's this group of producers that didn't sequester anything. That's what that buffer's for. Because then that buffer doesn't throw everybody out of the program. You see where I'm going with this? It keeps everything going so that there's marketable credits, so that when everything does transmit and move forward for you, then you have the opportunity to realize the value of those. So the buffer's real. That's a good question, but that's not unique to us. The other thing is, I always like to use this disclaimer. Most of these rules and these things they're based on what the buyers want. The buyers are truly dictating, what the rules are in this game. We're trying to facilitate and trying to put the real world to it as close as we can on what's practical to actually do on your farm, and working with them every day to do that. So, go ahead.
Determines what those practices work. I've seen different ones, $5 for this practice, $3 for this practice. And then for me to implement those practices, I need a $100,000 piece of equipment, spend $40 an acre on seed that I have here. That doesn't even begin to move the meter. So, and to me, an Apple who's making billions of dollars could be paying how much for
No, you're exactly right, and it's so we spend a lot of time trying to determine what to pay for practices, and knowing, that we can't pay for all of them, but it's an investment that we work together on, and it's a challenge. I think what I see the transformation just starting is what's really unique is not only are these companies going to buy credits, but they're going to pass through significant dollars to help fund these practices. That's a huge win, folks. Whether you agree with that or not, somebody's going to, so we're going to, and in all of this, you don't lose the ownership of your farm, the management of your farm. You're just working with, our entire teams are all agronomy, agricultural people. We're not, our scientists, well, yeah, that's a different story, but our day-to-day folks are just agricultural folks working alongside you, just like your trusted advisors that you work with and anything. And so if we can get to that point, then John, what you're talking about softens the blow a ton. But you're right today. That's where moving the row crop piece of this forward faster is a challenge because of that. It costs 40-some bucks to put in a cover crop. If you're going to change tillage equipment, you have to make a significant investment. And $7 an acre doesn't necessarily help a lot. We seem to get a lot of people on the row crop side that are in transition. They're going to do it anyway, so why not, let's work with them. But, we've got a lot of work to do on the row crop side, and so does all the companies from that standpoint. But any other questions? Go ahead.
Larry, who should certify these agency authorities? What is the third-party verifier agency that they certified by? Surely there's something.
Absolutely. So Vera, who we work with, the people that they use for verification and the auditors that they use are from also a different agency. So then they pick those people that come from a specific audit agency or verification agency that helps do that. So.
Is there an overarching certification body that they have to go through to get this?
Yes. Yeah. There's a set of standards and a set of rules that they have to follow that are dictated by, and each practice and each methodology obviously has a different set, Tim, to that. But there's an overarching registry piece that says, hey, this is how we do this. This is how they're certified, and then that's also tied to how we get, hey, there's this pasture that's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that's in the registry that's in the Agoro program. Okay, there could be another field that's in someone else's program, but that's in place so that Larry's not signed up for 2 different programs on the same acre. So that is in place to regulate that piece. So, is everybody excited about carbon?
Do you take a portion of that credit then for your service?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
75%.
No. Our CFO keeps saying it's not enough. I say it's, we just keep arm wrestling. But so what we're doing is, so all of our teams we have a carbon team, we have a science team, and so all those teams grow our success. Our soil sampling is third party too, because that's critical as well. So we pay for the soil sampling. You as a producer do not. So we're withstanding all those costs. And yeah, there's a percentage of it that we take, obviously, to do that. And people ask, a pretty typical question that we get is, can I do this myself? Absolutely. If you want to go find a soil stratification scientist, let me know because they're hard to find. There's not a lot of, you see where I'm going with this. I make it sound super easy and straightforward, but there's a lot of things that go on in terms to make it super important. And there's all kinds of things that are going to transpire as we move forward with this. There's going to be, today, the opportunity to get in with very little to limited regulation is critical, because at some point I'm not saying there have to be, but there's going to be some involvement from someone in the government, I would assume, to see how this whole thing's going. And I'm careful about saying that. There's pieces of that's not bad, because maybe we finally have an index. Maybe we know that carbon's traded every day at, today it's on like years ago when they tried to do it on the Chicago Board of Trade. Maybe we get to the point where we know what our commodity's worth. But the thing that I tell people is, if you're interested, do your due diligence, work with somebody you trust. 10 years is a long commitment. But what's interesting is if carbon sequestration takes a long time, so don't wait forever, because it takes a long time to do that. And I think the market's, really going to have a good opportunity. So you have another question? That's a great question. We will be year 2 of commercialization, be June next year. So we're about 18 months in. The organization has been at it for little over 2 years. But what's interesting is carbon companies go, we're kind of ancient. We've been around for a long time, but we're just getting started in the process. Our major stakeholder is we are backed, very financial stable. We are not venture capital dollars. That's the thing that's really encouraging about what we're doing. We have the staying power to look and do this the right way and take the time, and that's why we're focused on this long-term game for us. So we will, by the end of 23, we'll be on over 3 million acres. So, and we could be on more, but you have to take care of your customers, and there's a lot of things that go on with this journey that to make sure things are done right. So we're probably about 78% rangeland today and 27% cropland. So, and we'll continue to grow in the pasture side of it. We think it's a tremendous opportunity. We think that the dollars really affect communities in rural America and get right to the source. And so we're excited about that, and we can make real practice changes today, and we don't have to make excuses for what we're doing. So, but it's an exciting time. But please come see us, or we'll sure be glad to visit with you and try to answer any questions. And if we don't know them, we'll sure tell you we don't know them, because we don't have all the answers today. But we're excited about the opportunity. Thank you guys for having us here today. So, any other questions?